Jinnah of Pakistan by Stanley Wolpert. Chapter 18 Simla Revisited, 1946. Masterful leader that he was, Jinnah marshaled his forces, tightening his grip on the sword arm of his embryonic nation throughout the negotiations with the cabinet mission. All newly elected Muslim League legislators from provincial and central assemblies mustered in Delhi during early April 1946 to take and sign solemn pledges in the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Merciful, declaring their conviction that the safety and security and the salvation and destiny of the Muslim nation inhabiting the subcontinent of India lies only in the achievement of Pakistan, and believing as I do in the rightness and the justice of my cause, I pledge myself to undergo any danger, trial, or sacrifice which may be demanded of me. That pledge was unanimously affirmed by every elected representative of the Muslim League amidst loud cheers. Armed with those promissory notes on the life of every Muslim League leader in British India, Quaid-e-Azam reminded his followers, "We have made a solemn declaration in this august and historic convention that while we hope for the best, we are prepared for the worst." "What next?" asked Bengal's Sohrawardy, moving the pledge resolution that night. "We want to live in peace. We do not intend to start a civil war, but we want a land where we can live in peace. I have long pondered whether the Muslims are prepared to fight. Let me honestly declare that every Muslim of Bengal is ready and prepared to lay down his life." And turning to Quaid-e-Azam, he demanded, "I call upon you to test us." His famine-depleted province would soon be saturated with blood. Khaliquz-Zaman spoke in Urdu, affirming that Muslims will now decide their own destiny, and he turned towards his great leader sitting on the platform in the Anglo-Arabic hall, wearing a cream-colored sherwani, white shalwar, and regal fur cap, vowing, "We will lay down our lives for Pakistan." The Punjab's Nawab of Mamdod raised his mighty right arm as he spoke. "We are asked how we will defend Pakistan. I would say that if stalwart soldiers of the Punjab could defend Britain against Nazi aggression, they can also defend their own hearths and homes." From the northwest frontier rose Pathan leader Khan Abdul Qayyum Khan amidst thunderous applause to shout, "Thank God we have one flag, one leader, one platform, and one ideal, Pakistan, to fight for. We are only waiting for the final order to do whatever is considered necessary for the attainment of Pakistan." Young Sardar Shaukat Hayat Khan was there to assure his Quaid-e-Azam, "I speak for the Punjabi soldier, and I say that 750,000 demobilized soldiers in the Punjab are pledged to achieve Pakistan. You, sir, are holding us back, and we beg of you to give the word of command. Let us prove to the doubting how we can and how we mean to defend our Pakistan." More restrained perhaps because he was older, Sir Feroz Khan Noon said, "Neither the Hindus nor the British know yet how far we have prepared to go in order to achieve Pakistan. We are on the threshold of a great tragedy." "What are we fighting for? What are we aiming at?" Jinnah asked his band of loyal followers immediately after they pledged him their all, as though suddenly awakening from a dream to find himself at the edge of a dreadful precipice. "We Muslims have got everything: brains, intelligence, capacity, and courage, virtues that nations must possess. But two things are lacking, and I want you to concentrate your attention on these. One thing is that foreign domination from without and Hindu domination here, particularly on our economic life, has caused a certain degeneration of these virtues in us. We have lost the fullness of our noble character." And what is character? The highest sense of honor and the highest sense of integrity, conviction, incorruptibility, readiness at any time to efface oneself for the collective good of the nation. And yet, we have done wonders. In 5 years, our renaissance has been a miracle of achievement. I begin to think it has been a dream. The mission returned from holiday in Srinagar on April 24th and asked Cripps to meet with Jinnah informally that evening to put to him their latest plan. In Kashmir, Nehru and Gandhi had seen and rejected a three-tier federation with provinces grouped to embrace the areas of Pakistan demanded by the League, with the rest of British India going to Hindustan and the princely states being permitted to join either. The All India Union at the top of the federation would have controlled defense, foreign affairs, communications, and minority problems. The federated groups of Hindustan and Pakistan were to have had their own flags and internal security forces, and they would have been governed by central legislatures, each electing equal members of representatives to an all India union. Minority problems and complaints would have been referred to a union court presenting the major communities. The Muslim League and Congress would each have appointed drafting committees of their own to draw up group constitutions. Congress leadership argued that such a plan actually created Pakistan before anyone really tested the extent of the desire for such a new state, even among Muslim representatives. The mission then proposed electing a special commission from between 150 to 200 members from all the newly elected representatives of every assembly and putting Pakistan to a vote in that body. If at least 20% of the commission voted for Pakistan, then Muslim representatives of provincial assemblies of the Punjab, Sindh, the Northwest Frontier, Bengal and Assam's Sylhet district could meet separately to vote on whether they wished to opt out of an Indian union. If at least 75% so voted, they would remain outside, and if Sindh, the Punjab and the Northwest Frontier opted to separate, then Balochistan would also become part of that Pakistan, as would Bengal and Sylhet. Non-Muslim majority districts within these provinces, as in East Punjab and West Bengal, could vote to remain in the Indian Union, and if 75% of their representatives preferred it, those border provinces would be so partitioned. Cripps found Jinnah in an unreceptive mood. Jinnah did, however, write down the points Cripps proposed, and he said that if Congress would accept these proposals, he would put them to his working committee. Knowing how cautious and quickly negative Jinnah could be when he disliked a proposal, Wavell believed that Jinnah's mere willingness to present a plan to his followers constituted provisional, very provisional acceptance. Cripps was therefore authorized to see Nehru informally and to sound him on the mission's proposition. But Jawaharlal turned down the new proposal flat. They were back to square one. That evening, Cripps returned to Jinnah's house and once again put to him the previous A and B plans. Jinnah definitely rejected the minimum sovereign Pakistan embodied in Plan B, but was prepared to put Plan A, the three-tiered federal union, before his working committee if he could be assured that Congress were prepared to consider it. Cripps was so heartened by this breakthrough that he took Plan A to Azad the next day. Though Nehru had just agreed to become his successor as president of the Congress the next month, and the Maulana proposed a summit meeting of 4 Congress and 4 League leaders to hammer out details of that solution. Cripps immediately went back to Jinnah with his good news. However, Jinnah reminded him that what he had previously expressed was merely his personal opinion and not necessarily that of the League, though he was willing to put that idea before his working committee. The mission and Wavell next drafted a letter to both Jinnah and Azad, proposing a summit meeting at Simla. New Delhi by then was sweltering, and everyone agreed that chances of reaching closure were bound to be brighter in the cool, rarefied, more rational atmosphere of a Himalayan hill station. They reconvened at Simla on May 5th, Wavell's 63rd birthday. Jinnah chose Liaquat Ali Khan, Sardar Abdur Rab Nishtar, and Nawab Muhammad Ismail Khan to join him at the summit. Azad selected Nehru, Patel, and Khan Abdul Ghaffar Khan as Congress's team, thus making it half Muslim and half Hindu. Jinnah refused to shake hands with Azad, but otherwise the meeting got off to what Wavell viewed as not too bad start. The first point of controversy arose over union finances. Congress wanted the centre to have powers of direct taxation and to be self-supporting, while Jinnah advocated that it should be given a lump sum and should have to go to the groups if it wanted more. They moved on to controversy over a central legislature. Congress insisted on having one, and Jinnah was negative. His arguments weaker and more unconvincing, as Wavell noted. Jinnah naturally wanted his legislature at the second-tier group level of Pakistan, where Congress was opposed to establishing any form of parliament. The underlying cause of every argument and conflict at Simla remained the basic difference between the League's two-nation and Congress's unitary government philosophies of political life. On the morning of May 6th, Nehru and Jinnah crossed swords in what was to evolve into the most deadly duel in Indian history. Nehru said that the Union of India, even if the list of subjects was short, must be strong and organic. Provinces would not be prevented from cooperating among themselves over such subjects as education and health, but they would not need a group executive. He appealed to the League to come into the constitution-making body on the assurance that there would be no compulsion. Mr. Jinnah replied that he could not accept that invitation, but if the Congress would accept the groups, the Muslim League would accept the union. Nehru pointed out that Mr. Jinnah had accepted no feature of the union. The union without a legislature would be futile and entirely unacceptable. While Nehru and Jinnah fenced, Patel's face of cold, angry disapproval was a study worthy of viceregal notice. That afternoon, Nehru said that the question of grouping would arise after the constitution had been formed, insisting that the first question to decide was the character of the union. After that, provinces might exercise their autonomy subject to the Union Constitution, and provincial representatives might bring up in the All India Constitution-making body proposals for grouping. Cripps drafted a new points of agreement document which he planned to show Gandhi that evening, asking Wavell to tackle Jinnah. The Mahatma was living in Simla's Chadwick bungalow with Patel and Ghaffar Khan, but he had not come to any mission meetings. Cripps had hoped to win Gandhi's support, but he struck out. Gandhi argued that the proposed solution was worse than Pakistan, and he could not recommend it to Congress. He seemed quite unmoved at the prospect of civil war, Wavell noted, concluding, I think he, Gandhi, had adopted Patel's thesis that if we are firm, the Muslims will not fight. The following evening, Wavell met with Jinnah for over an hour. He was friendly, but showed his deep and utter mistrust of Congress and all their works. He is convinced of their intention to split the Muslims and secure Hindu domination. He said finally that we must do what we think just and fair, but not press him too hard. Meanwhile, Cripps returned to tackle Gandhi, and this time said the Mahatma gave full approval to an outlined proposal of three-tier system. Wavell, who did not quite trust Cripps and wholly mistrusted Gandhi, was not at all persuaded that Cripps had led Gandhi up to the altar, more likely that Gandhi had led Cripps down the garden path. On May 8, 1946, Pethick Lawrence sent Jinnah and Azad identical copies of 9 suggested points of agreement that started with there shall be an all-India union government and legislature dealing with foreign affairs, defense, communication, fundamental rights and having the necessary powers to obtain for itself the finances it requires for these subjects. Then vested all the remaining powers in the provinces and, as point 3 stated, groups of provinces provinces may be formed, and such groups may determine the provincial subjects which they desire to take in common. Jinnah replied the same day from Yaroz, the bungalow he occupied in Simla. We are of the opinion that the new suggested points for agreement are a fundamental departure from the original formula embodied in your letter of 27th April, which was rejected by Congress. In these circumstances, we think no useful purpose will be served to discuss this paper. Gandhi also rejected the written points of agreement for various reasons, but primarily because 90 million Muslims would enjoy parity over the 200 million Hindus, an idea he termed really worse than Pakistan. They were back to drawing board. Cripps went to see Azad. Wavell visited Jinnah. Nehru was with Azad when Cripps saw them, finding them both reasonable but having great difficulty with colleagues, presumably meaning Patel. Jinnah assured Wavell that he was trying to be reasonable, but that he was already the subject of criticism from his supporters for having yielded on the acceptance of a union of any kind, which he termed a great concession. Thus, he insisted on Pakistan groups meeting to define their own constitution. On the evening of May 9th, Nehru proposed that Congress and the League should meet with an empire to settle their points of difference. Jinnah replied that he would be pleased to meet any Hindu representatives of Congress. There was a pregnant silence for a minute or so, and then Nehru suggested that he and Jinnah should meet there and see whether they could decide on an empire. Everyone else left the conference room and strolled round Simla's lawns for 40 minutes while Jinnah and Nehru locked horns in a single combat. They agreed only to adjourn for 2 days, however, and resolved to meet again on Saturday, May 11th at 3 p.m. Nehru wrote Jinnah that day on the eve of their meeting to report that he and his colleagues had given a good deal of thought to the choice of a suitable empire, deciding that it would be probably desirable to exclude Englishmen, Hindus and Muslims and Sikhs. The field was thus quite limited, but Congress drew up a considerable list that included Americans. Jinnah replied that there were several points that remained to be discussed, besides the fixing of any empire, and informed Nehru that he would be glad to meet with him any time after 10 a.m. on Saturday. Nehru answered, I was under the impression that the proposal to have an empire had been agreed to, and our next business was to suggest names. Nonetheless, the two leaders met at Jinnah's residence at 10:30 a.m. They fought on till after 6 p.m. when Pethick Lawrence asked Jinnah to put his precise conditions in writing for the next round to begin Sunday evening. Jinnah sent a written statement of 10 principles to Pethick Lawrence the next day. There were to be separate constitution-making bodies for the Pakistan and Hindustan groups and parity of representation between the groups in a union, executive or legislature that might be established. No controversial decision could be taken in the union except by a 3/4 majority. Azad also submitted a written proposal of suggested points of agreement on behalf of the Congress. It opened with the formation of a single constituent assembly composed of elective representatives of all provinces and princely states. Pethick Lawrence asked both parties that evening if they thought, in view of positions they had outlined, that they saw any chance of reaching agreement. No one could honestly say yes. The Secretary of State, therefore, felt he had no further option but to close the conference. The Cabinet Mission and Viceroy planned to return to New Delhi on Tuesday. That Monday, May 13th, Wavell talked with Jinnah, who looked tired and ill. They talked about the new executive council that the Viceroy proposed to appoint. Wavell offered the League parity with Congress, planning to include one Sikh, one scheduled caste member, and one other minority. He urged Jinnah to accept so favorable a proportion. Jinnah listened carefully but made little comment. He said that whether or not the Muslim League came into the interim government would depend on whether our statement seemed likely to offer a solution of the long term issue. His fear was that the Congress plan was to get control of the central government and concentrate on getting control in the provinces. Jinnah planned to remain in Simla to rest and recuperate, Wavell reported, for at least 3 weeks. The mission now felt obliged to propose its own settlement, a final move in this stalemated game. It had listened to all the arguments, studied all the documents, and questioned all the witnesses. Judgment could be deferred no longer. The Prime Minister demanded an account of his mission's progress. The cable between Simla and London was kept hot and humming through many a mid-May night. The Labour government seemed almost ready to break apart, if not topple from power, over the Congress League struggle. The cabinet mission broadcast its plan worldwide from New Delhi on Thursday night, May 16, 1946. It was the last hope for a single Indian Union to emerge peacefully in the wake of the British Raj. The statement reviewed the fully independent sovereign state of Pakistan option, rejecting it for various reasons, among which were that it would not solve the communal minority problem, but only raise more such problems, especially for Sikhs, while irrevocably shattering the military, economic, and administrative unity so arduously developed throughout the last century and more of British rule. The basic form of the constitution recommended was a three-tier scheme with a minimal central union at the top for only foreign affairs, defense, and communications, and provinces at the bottom, which should be free to form groups with executives and legislatures, with each group being empowered to determine the provincial subjects to be taken in common. Every 10 years, any province could, by simple majority vote, call for a reconsideration of the terms of the constitutions. Details of the new constitutions were to be worked out by an assembly representing as broad-based and accurate a cross-section of the population of India as possible. An elaborate method of assuring proper representation of all communities was outlined, with due consideration given to the representation of states as well as provinces. To the leaders and people of India who now have the opportunity to complete independence, we would finally say this. The mission statement concluded, we and our government and countrymen hoped that it would be possible for the Indian people themselves to agree upon the method of framing the new constitution under which they will live, despite the labors which we have shared with the Indian parties. This has not been possible. We therefore now lay before you proposals which we trust will enable you to attain your independence in the shortest time and with the least danger of internal disturbance and conflict. These proposals may not, of course, completely satisfy all parties. We ask you to consider the alternative to acceptance of these proposals, a grave danger of violence, chaos, and even civil war. The result and duration of such a disturbance cannot be foreseen, but it is certain that it would be a terrible disaster for many millions of men, women, and children. We appeal to all who have the future good of India at heart to extend their vision beyond their own community or interest to interests of the whole 400 millions of the Indian people. We look forward with you to your ever-increasing prosperity among the great nations of the world and to a future even more glorious than your past. Whatever the wrong done to India by British rule, Gandhi commented the next day, if the statement of the mission was genuine, as he believed it was in discharge of an obligation they had declared the British owed to India, namely to get off India's back. It contained the seed to convert this land of sorrow into one without sorrow and suffering. Pethick Lawrence and Cripps met with Gandhi the following morning for almost 3 hours and reported to Wavell and Alexander that at the outset Mr. Gandhi had seemed very content with the government's statement, but later he had raised a point over which the Secretary of State felt some difficulty. Question whether the procedure laid down for the Constituent Assembly was subject to alteration, whether it was open to Congress representatives in the Constituent Assembly at the opening meeting to deal with procedure, to raise the question whether the Assembly should in fact divide into the three sections or whether it should decide the Union's constitution first. Mr. Gandhi indicated that his support for the statement would hinge on this point. The Viceroy was not very clear what was at the back of Gandhi's mind in raising this question, but argued forcefully, as Jinnah had, that he was quite convinced that the primary objective of Congress was to get power at the center in the interim government, so that it could then at any time torpedo the constitution-making body by raising some crucial communal issue. Jinnah phoned from Srinagar on May 18th to report that the reaction of the Muslims against the statement is very strong and requested a month before coming to any decision in order to have time to consult with his working committee. He was obviously fighting for time on two counts: his own fragile health, taxed to its limit by the week's talks, and his concern about extremists in his own party who were ready to launch jihad without further delay. If the thing was rushed, everything would be spoiled, Jinnah warned Wavell's private secretary in their telephone conversation. Next morning, the mission met with Liaquat Ali Khan and informed him it was impossible for them to wait 4 weeks for Jinnah's response. They pressed him to urge Jinnah to return to Delhi at once or to authorize the Nawabzada Liaquat Ali to negotiate. Liaquat promised to try but returned that afternoon after a talk with Jinnah on the phone and said that Jinnah was calling the working committee for June 3rd and 4th and the council for June 5, and begged not to be hurried as it would take time to persuade his people to accept the proposals. The mission agreed, though rather reluctantly. Jinnah planned to return to New Delhi on 2nd June, cutting his much-needed vacation in the hills short by a week. On May 19th, the very day Liaquat Ali met with the mission, Gandhi wrote Pethick Lawrence from Valmiki Mandir, where he was staying in New Delhi, to ask further clarification on the same sticking point he had raised in earlier conversation with the Secretary of State. Do you regard a recommendation as obligatory on any member of the contemplated Constituent Assembly? Inquired the Mahatma. I know the legal position, Gandhi added. My question has reference to the honorableness of opposition to grouping. Wavell read that letter as the first of the Congress efforts to wreck the groups of provinces. Cripps drafted a reply to Gandhi which explained, "We have stated publicly that we cannot further negotiate these proposals which are, as far as we are concerned, in their final form." On May 20th, Gandhi wrote again, this time at a greater length. I would put on the record that my conviction that independence in fact would be a farce if the British troops are in India even for peace and order within or danger from without. If the position about the troops persists, independence next month is either insincere or a thoughtless try. Acceptance of quit India by the British is unconditional, whether the Constituent Assembly succeeds or fails. A drastic revision of the attitude is a necessity. As to the interim government, the more I think and observe, the more certain is my feeling that a proper national government, responsible in fact, if not in law, to the elected members of the Central Legislative Assembly, should precede the summons for the elections of the members of the Constituent Assembly. Without it, deep and universal corruption cannot end. Without it, the psychological effect will not be produced. Every day's delay in forming such a government is agony to the famished millions of India. First Lord Alexander was then convinced that Gandhi had two objects: to humiliate the British government and to promote a policy of scuttle, and secondly, to secure power without a constitution coming into being, and so to abandon the just claims of the Muslim League.